Butter ran out of the croissant in a clear amber ribbon and spread across the white tasting card. Vivian Shore pressed one finger to the puddle, then rubbed it against her thumb. Around the test kitchen, 6 people stopped chewing. "We've had 37 complaints from 9 properties," she said. "Flat layers, greasy trays, weak lift. Grant, what changed?" My uncle didn't look at the pastry. He looked at me. "She approved the recipe," he announced. I felt every face turn. Grant tapped the release sheet beside my plate, right above my initials. "She approved every production batch in question. Mara, collect your things and leave." "I approved the client formula," I said. My voice came out level, almost quiet. "This doesn't taste like the client formula." "Not another word. You're done here." The bakery fat coating my tongue had a waxy finish that our cultured butter never left. I knew the batch tasted wrong. I also knew Celia Brooks, the hotel group's auditor, had collected untouched controls before production and sealed them with blue tape in front of both of us. What I couldn't understand was why Grant had chosen to humiliate me with evidence still sitting in someone else's freezer. Vivian glanced from him to me. She was the hotel group's culinary director, a compact woman with silver hair and a habit of cutting pastries with a ruler before she tasted them. "Did you say it's the wrong formula?" she asked. Grant stepped between us without making it look like a step. He had that gift. He could block a doorway while appearing to offer you his chair. "She's upset," he said. "I should have handled this privately." "You're handling it pretty publicly," said Elliot Park, the procurement manager. Grant's mouth tightened for half a second. "Because your team deserves accountability. The complaints stop with me." They did not, apparently, start with him. I looked down at the croissant. The exterior was too dark because someone had added bake time, but the center was dense and pale. Instead of separate sheets of dough divided by clean butter layers, there were gummy ledges pressed together like damp cardboard. Near the torn end, a bead of fat hardened to a cloudy pearl. I took out my notebook. Grant put his palm over it. "Leave it. It's mine." The notes concern Hartwell product. The notebook belongs to me. His hand stayed there. The cuff of his white shirt was dusted with flour, an artful detail considering he hadn't worked near an open bag of flour all morning. Vivian slid the stained tasting card toward me. "Then at least take your trash." Her face revealed nothing, but the card stopped directly beside my notebook. I folded it once, grease inward, and tucked it between 2 pages. Then I capped my pen and stood. Rosa Mendez, our lamination lead, stared at the steel work table. Beside her, our production manager, Owen Pike, became fascinated by the hotel's programmable oven. Grant opened the test kitchen door. "Your badge," he said. "It's clipped to my coat." "I want it now." We were 2 hours from the plant. My coat, purse, car keys, and badge were in the client's conference room on the other side of the building. "I need it to get my things." "I'll escort you." Elliot made a soft sound that might have been a laugh if anything had been funny. Grant led me down the corridor, walking half a pace behind me, as if he thought I might grab a chafing dish and take a hostage. Framed photographs of hotel dining rooms lined the walls. In each one, white tablecloths waited beneath lights the color of honey. Our pastry appeared in 3 of those rooms every morning. That contract had taken Grant 11 months to win. At the conference room door, he caught my elbow. "Don't make this worse." I looked at his hand until he removed it. "Did you change the butter?" For the first time that morning, he looked honestly offended. "Your problem," he said, "is that you hear one complaint and immediately go hunting for a villain." 37 complaints. The line has been inconsistent. Owen has been telling you that for weeks. Owen said the number 2 belt was drifting. That wouldn't change the melting point. Grant lowered his voice. "You're 27 years old. You've had 1 laboratory job and this one. Don't confuse knowing how to fill out a sensory sheet with knowing how to keep a manufacturer alive." There it was, the favor and the invoice for it. 3 years earlier, when the dairy laboratory eliminated my department, Grant had offered me a place at Hartwell. He had driven to my apartment with sandwiches and a yellow legal pad. By the time he left, he had designed a quality control position around the parts of my old job I was good at. For the first year, he introduced me to vendors as his secret weapon. I had believed both versions of him, the uncle carrying sandwiches and the owner counting what they cost. I unclipped my badge and set it in his hand. "Who authorized the extra bake time?" I asked. Nobody authorized it. "The samples are 4 shades darker than the pilot standard. Go home, Mara." I collected my coat and purse. As I passed the kitchen again, Rosa finally looked up. She touched 2 fingers to the breast pocket of her production jacket, where she kept the brass temperature probe I had loaned her. Then Grant closed the door between us. Outside, a March wind shoved grit across the parking garage. I sat in my car without starting it and waited for my hands to stop shaking. The insult itself wasn't the worst part. Grant knew my work. He knew I wouldn't release dough because it was close enough. He had once teased me for rejecting a pallet of butter because the driver's temperature printout had a 7-minute gap. "If the truck burst into flames during those 7 minutes," he'd said, "I believe somebody would have mentioned it." I had rejected it anyway. The supplier later admitted the trailer door had been left open at a transfer yard. Grant told that story whenever he wanted clients to trust us. Now he was using the same initials as a weapon. I opened my notebook to the tasting card. The grease had already soaked through, leaving an amber half moon on the next page. I wrote the date, the hotel test kitchen oven number, the tray label, and the time the pastries had come out. Then I wrote, "Waxy finish, slow melt, pale internal crumb, despite dark exterior, visible fat migration, possible non-butter shortening." My phone buzzed against the cup holder. A message from Grant appeared. "Do not contact client or employees, pending review." A second message followed before I could lock the screen. "Report to my office at 3 o'clock. He wanted the drive home to do some of his work for him. Hartwell Laminated Foods sat behind a roofing warehouse outside Grove City, in a beige building that looked too small to feed 30 hotels. The loading docks faced the highway. On production days, the air outside smelled faintly sweet from the dough room, though inside the dominant smells were sanitizer, cold steel, and butter. At 3, my badge no longer opened the employee entrance. I stood in the wind until Owen came through carrying a trash bag full of disposable hair nets. He saw me and stopped. Owen was broad, careful, and usually able to turn bad news into a story about fishing. "Grant's expecting me," I said. "Yeah." He shifted the bag to his other hand. "I heard." "All of it?" "I heard enough." "Did you increase the bake setting on the hotel samples?" His eyebrows rose. "I'm taking out trash, Mara." "That isn't an answer." "It's the answer I've got while standing next to a security camera." He opened the door with his badge but didn't hold it for me. I caught it before it shut. Grant's office overlooked the packaging area through a wide interior window. From his desk, he could watch finished pastries travel beneath the metal detector and into white cartons. He liked to say he built the office there, so management could never hide from production. He kept motorized blinds for the days he preferred hiding. The blinds were closed. Our controller, Elaine, sat beside his desk with a legal pad. She wasn't family, though she had worked for Hartwell long enough to know which arguments had started before she arrived. Grant pushed a 1-page document toward me. The header read, "Corrective Action, Quality Release Failure." I read the first paragraph twice. It said I had failed to identify variation caused by improper sheeter settings. It said I had authorized continued production without adequate sensory review. It said management had discovered the issue after receiving client complaints and had immediately suspended the responsible technician. "You wrote this before the tasting," I said. Grant leaned back. "We had complaints before the tasting." "You told the client you were still investigating." I was. My name is already typed into the responsible person field. Elaine kept her eyes on her legal pad. Grant pushed a pen across the desk. "Your signature confirms receipt, not agreement." The signature line said, "Employee acknowledgement and acceptance of findings. I'd like a copy. You can have one after you sign." "I'll take a photograph then." Grant put his hand over the page. He liked using his hands to stop things. "Let's lower the temperature," Elaine said. "Everybody's had a difficult morning." "The butter needs a lower temperature," I said. "That's part of the problem." Grant's face changed. Not much, but enough. I saw him hear resistance and begin calculating around it. "The approved butter was within specification," he said. "I didn't ask if it was within specification. I asked if you changed it. You're making a serious accusation based on a mouthful of pastry. And you're blaming 37 complaints on me based on a document you won't let me photograph." Elaine set down her pen. "Mara, is there any possibility a release was signed without a full bench bake?" "No. Any possibility someone used your login?" "My login can't release a batch without the matching instrument code from the bench oven." Grant said, "Unless the code was copied from an earlier run." "That would show in the timestamp." "Which quality controls?" "IT controls the server." Enough. The packaging line started beyond the blinds. Even through the wall, I recognized the soft mechanical rhythm: belt, seal, stamp. Every few seconds, a carton tapped the guide rail with a hollow knock. Grant folded the corrective action in half. "We are 6 weeks from a bank review," he said. "The hotel program is the difference between renewing our operating line and cutting a shift. I'm trying to keep 84 people employed. Then find out what happened." "I know what happened. We had sheeter variation. You missed it. We fix both problems and demonstrate control." "By firing me?" "By suspending you during the review." "Unpaid?" Elaine looked at Grant. That answer had not been settled before I walked in. "Unpaid," he said. It landed harder than I expected. My checking account immediately arranged itself into rent, utilities, and the balance on my car loan. Grant noticed. His voice softened. "Sign the acknowledgement. We tell the client you're being retrained. 2 weeks, maybe less, and you're back with a clean slate." A clean slate meant his words written over mine. "What lot of butter went into H-0314? I asked. "The receiving records will answer that. I'm asking you. You no longer have investigative authority. So you've checked." Grant rose. He was not a large man, but he understood height and furniture. With him standing and me seated, the meeting became what he wanted it to be. "I gave you a career when you needed one," he said. "I gave you authority people twice your age had to earn over decades. Don't repay that by setting fire to the place because you're embarrassed." I stood too. "You ordered me out in front of the client." "Because you challenged me in front of the client." "You blamed me before I spoke." Elaine rubbed one temple. Grant held out the pen again. "Last chance." "No." For a moment, disappointment crossed his face so cleanly that I almost apologized. That was his most convincing expression because some part of it was always real. He opened the office door. "Elaine will send the suspension terms." I walked past him into the corridor. The production floor was visible through 3 narrow windows. Dough blocks traveled toward the first reduction roller, pale and square, while operators in blue coats checked the edges for cracking. On the far side of the room, Rosa stood at the sheeter with her head down. As I passed, she raised one hand without looking at me. 2 fingers touched her breast pocket. The temperature probe. Then she turned toward the line. My father was waiting outside my apartment when I got home. David Hartwell had Grant's narrow face, but none of his polish. He repaired commercial refrigeration systems and wore work shirts with his name stitched above the pocket, even on days off. He held a paper bag from the diner between us. "Turkey Club," he said. "No mayonnaise." The same peace offering Grant had brought 3 years earlier. "I'm not hungry." "You will be." He followed me upstairs. In my kitchen, he unpacked 2 sandwiches and lined the pickle spears on a napkin so their juice wouldn't touch the bread. "Grant called you," I said. "He told me there was a scene." He created the scene. "He says you accused him of falsifying ingredients at the client's headquarters." I asked if he changed the butter. Dad unwrapped his sandwich but didn't eat. That contract keeps the doors open. Does that make the answer yes? It makes the question expensive. I took the stain tasting card from my notebook and placed it under the kitchen light. This came out of a croissant made to our approved recipe according to Grant. Dad touched the translucent edge with one knuckle. Could be too warm at lamination. The internal structure would smear differently. Could be the oven. Not with that finish. You always were stubborn once your tongue told you something. He meant it affectionately. That made it worse. I signed releases for the correct formula, I said. He wants me to accept responsibility for product that doesn't match it. Dad looked at the card for a long time. Sign that you received the report, he said. Then fight about the wording after the bank review. The report says acceptance. Family businesses survive because sometimes somebody absorbs the ugly part. Why does that somebody have to be me? He folded the wax paper around his untouched sandwich. Because Grant will keep the company alive. And what am I supposed to keep? He stood, dropped his sandwich back into the bag and left mine on the counter. At 8:12 that evening, Elaine emailed the suspension letter. My system access had been revoked. I was forbidden from entering Hartwell property or communicating with staff about the investigation. The company would contact me within 10 business days. I read it twice, then opened my notebook. The page before the stain tasting card held my notes from Celia Brooks's audit. 3 stainless control tins, approved cultured butter in the first, pilot dough in the second, first production mix in the third, cobalt seals initialed by Celia and me, 1 set in Hartwell's retained freezer, and 1 set removed under client custody. At the bottom, Celia had written her direct email address in green ink. I put my fingers on the keyboard, then stopped. Grant wanted me frightened enough to argue recklessly. He expected a long accusation he could forward to a lawyer, the client, or my father. I sent Celia 1 sentence. Please confirm the client-held controls from your Hartwell audit remain sealed and in your custody. Her answer came 11 minutes later. Confirmed. All seals intact. I looked at the amber crescent spreading through the tasting card, then at the blue ink notation beneath Celia's name. Grant had my badge, my paycheck, and the building. He did not have every sample. I answered Celia with another short message. Thank you. Please preserve the chain of custody record as well. Then I closed the laptop before gratitude could turn into explanation. At 11, someone buzzed my apartment from the lobby. I ignored it. The buzzer sounded again, 2 quick presses, a pause, then 1 more. That was how Rosa signaled for the forklift at the south freezer door. She stood downstairs in a gray hoodie, both hands shoved into the front pocket. Her hair was still pinned in the tight production floor knot she wore under a hairnet. You shouldn't be here, I said. Neither should you, technically. Your name's on the no entry list. He moves fast. He had Owen post it before second shift. Rosa walked past me toward the side of the building where the balconies blocked the lobby camera. She didn't ask me to follow. When we reached the recycling enclosure, she pulled the brass temperature probe from her pocket. I brought your property. You drove 20 minutes to return a probe? It's a very nice probe. It's a $40 probe. That's nice for a probe. She held it out. A folded sheet of copier paper was wrapped around the metal stem and secured with a rubber band. I didn't take it immediately. What is that? Your property. The paper isn't mine. Then recycle it. Rosa. She glanced toward the parking lot. Grant called a floor meeting after you left. He said the hotel product was under an internal hold because of quality release failures. He said nobody was to discuss batch history with you. And then? And then he asked whether anyone had seen you skip a bench bake. Did anyone answer? Owen said he'd review the records. That's not what I asked. Her jaw shifted. People have rent, she said. People have car payments. Some people have spouses who were laid off from a machine shop 3 months ago. I'm not asking anybody to quit. You don't have to. You ask a clean question and let the rest of us figure out how dirty the answer is. She pressed the probe into my hand. The paper crackled around it. I wrote down the dough and butter temperatures on H-0314 because the blend was getting soft at the infeed. Grant told me to check every 15 minutes. The official sheet only has the hourly entries. Why? Because Owen told me to recopy it clean. Did you? Yes. The word was blunt enough to bruise both of us. Rosa looked me in the face then. You ever try to make a mortgage payment with professional integrity? Not yet. Give it a week. She walked away before I could thank her or forgive her, neither of which she had requested. Upstairs, I removed the rubber band and flattened the copy beneath my salt shaker. Rosa's handwriting marched down the page in cramped blue numbers. The dough had entered the sheeter at 48 degrees. The roll-in fat had ranged from 44 to 46. Both were well inside our operating limits. There were no temperature spikes, no prolonged stops, no sign that butter had shattered from cold or smeared from heat. At 1:15 a.m., Rosa had written, P4 moved per G.H. stage BL-882. P4 was the freezer location where I had mapped the approved cultured butter during Celia's audit. BL-882 meant nothing to me. Our usual supplier's lot codes began with a plant number followed by the production date. At 2:05, she had drawn a circle around 46 and written softer block, pale wrapper, black corner. I searched my memory before I searched the internet. A black corner had flashed at me from beneath a torn stretch wrap on the Saturday run Grant called equipment calibration. I had been at the wash sink rinsing a bench scraper. The residue on the blade had felt slick even under hot water. I'd asked Owen what they were running. Scrap recovery, he'd said. There had been no scrap ticket on my desk Monday. I opened the suspension letter and read the restriction again. Hartwell could order me not to contact its employees. It could not make the past less specific. Elaine's courier arrived that afternoon with a box of my desk belongings. My mug was wrapped inside my spare lab coat. The small aloe plant I kept near the sensory station had been laid sideways on top, dirt scattered into the sleeves. Beneath it was a sealed envelope containing the corrective action. Grant had changed 2 sentences. The new version said an operator had reported seeing me enter an instrument code from a previous bench bake. It also said I had reacted defensively when questioned about the discrepancy. At the bottom, below the signature line, someone had typed, "Witness statement pending." He had noticed the timestamp problem. Now he was building around it. I photographed every page, then sent Elaine a written response. I do not accept these findings. I performed the required bench bakes for every batch I released. Please preserve the original electronic audit logs, oven instrument records, freezer movement records, receiving photographs, and all versions of this corrective action. Her reply came 9 minutes later. Received. Grant's came 2 minutes after that. You are escalating beyond what is necessary. Call me. I did not call. The contract laboratory where I had worked before Hartwell still used me for overflow sensory panels. The work paid by the day, with no guarantee that the next day would exist. On Thursday, I spent 8 hours comparing powdered vanilla samples in a room lit by fluorescent tubes. By the end, everything tasted like sweetened drywall. My supervisor there, Denise, watched me rinse my mouth for the 6th time. You're either taking this very seriously, she said, or trying to dissolve a body part. Can you taste cardboard? I can taste regret. That might be sample 604. The laugh surprised me. It came out too loud and ended too quickly. At lunch, I checked my bank account and calculated how many contract shifts would cover rent. The answer changed depending on whether I kept my car. I closed the app before it could offer an opinion. Celia emailed while I was labeling the afternoon samples. Mara, Hartwell has characterized the collected production control as an RD reference, not a commercial batch retain. Do you have any contemporaneous record of the sample designation? Grant couldn't break the seals, so he was trying to shrink what they meant. I knew better than to send her Rosa's log. It belonged in a chain of facts, not loose in an inbox where Grant could call it stolen or fabricated. I answered that the designation appeared in the controlled sampling procedure used during the audit and in Celia's own checklist. Her response took longer this time. Stand by. That phrase stayed in my head through sample 611, which tasted like vanilla frosting stored near a lawnmower. At 4, Celia sent me a scan of the audit checklist. Halfway down page 6, beside production controls, she'd written, "First commercial mix collected before full production. Sample selected from line after standard startup discard. Dual retain per HT-QA-14. My initials appeared beside hers. The procedure number mattered. So did the phrase, first commercial mix. Grant could call it a holiday fruitcake, but he had initialed the audit's closing page, confirming the collected items and their purpose. I printed the scan at the laboratory's coin-operated workstation and slid it into my notebook behind the stained tasting card. One small door had closed on him. He would look for another. My father returned on Friday, this time without sandwiches. He stood in the hallway holding the aloe plant in a clean ceramic pot. "You left this at Hartwell," he said. "It arrived dead yesterday." Not dead. Dramatic. He had brushed the loose dirt from its leaves and packed new soil around the roots. One leaf hung over the rim like a broken arm. I let him in. He placed the pot on my windowsill, rotated it twice, then went to the kitchen sink to wash his hands. "Grant says you sent a preservation notice." I sent Elaine a list. "He says that makes it sound like you're preparing to sue. It makes it sound like I don't want records disappearing." Dad dried his hands on a dish towel. "He hasn't destroyed anything." "How would you know?" His silence was less defensive than I expected. "You asked me Wednesday what you were supposed to keep," he said. "I've been thinking about that." And I don't know. I know your uncle. When the first freezer compressor failed, he stayed awake for 31 hours moving product to rented trailers. When the bank wanted to close us after the old flour contamination claim, he found 3 new customers in a month. He can be ruthless and still be the reason the place exists. That doesn't make him right. No, it makes the consequences more crowded. He looked at the notebook on my table. "You found something." The sheeter temperatures were in range. "From whose records?" I didn't answer. Dad nodded once. "Be careful with Rosa." "Why?" Grant offered her assistant production manager. There was no accusation in his voice. That was worse than if he had called her disloyal. "When?" "Yesterday." The promotion had existed at Hartwell for years. As a promise, Grant moved from person to person. More pay, better hours, a small glass office near packaging. Rosa had done much of the work without the title since before I arrived. "He's buying a statement," I said. "He's buying her loyalty. In his mind, that's different." "Is it different in yours?" Dad studied the damaged aloe leaf. "I fix refrigeration," he said. "Machines are easier. A bad compressor doesn't remind you what it did for you 10 years ago." After he left, I took Rosa's copied log out of the cabinet where I'd hidden it. The numbers hadn't changed. Neither had the note about P4. At Hartwell, P4 held 18 pallets when full. The auditor's photographs from the freezer walkthrough would show the approved butter in that location before production. If those pallets had been moved, the freezer movement record should show where. If Grant had replaced them, the receiving dock camera or intake photographs might show what arrived. I could identify the gap. I still couldn't reach the records inside it. Elaine sent Grant's severance offer Monday morning. 4 weeks' pay, neutral employment verification, mutual non-disparagement. I would acknowledge procedural lapses without accepting sole responsibility, return all company information, and agree not to contact Hartwell's clients. The offer expired at 5. At 10:30, Owen appeared at the contract laboratory's reception desk, carrying a paper cup of coffee he never drank. We sat in the loading area because visitors weren't allowed past reception. Delivery trucks rattled the metal door behind us. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "I've heard that a lot this week." He turned the cup between his hands. "You asked me about the oven settings." "And you were taking out trash." "The settings were raised after complaint 22. Grant said we needed more color." "So the darker bake wasn't part of my release?" "No." "Will you put that in writing?" His fingers tightened around the cup. "Mara, it's a straightforward fact. Nothing is straightforward when your paycheck comes from the person being asked. Grant already named me in writing." "I know. Rosa's getting promoted." His eyes flicked up. That was confirmation enough. "She earned it," he said. "I agree." "You don't sound like it." "She earned it 2 years ago. The timing is what sounds bad." Owen crushed one side of the empty cup. "Grant asked us to reconstruct the instrument code issue," he said. "He says someone remembers seeing you copy a code." "Who?" "He hasn't decided who remembers yet." The loading door shook as a truck backed against the dock bumper. "Put that in writing," I said. "I can't." "Then why come?" "Because you think facts make people brave. They don't. Sometimes they just make people scared in more detail." He stood and set the crushed cup on the chair. At the door, he turned back. "Don't sign the severance." "Why?" "Because the hotel asked for untouched receiving images, and Grant spent all morning telling Elaine they weren't part of quality records." That afternoon, I declined the offer and repeated my preservation request, adding receiving images by name. Grant's answer came as a calendar invitation to meet him and Elaine at a diner near the plant. He was already in a booth when I arrived. Stirring coffee, he drank black. Elaine sat beside him with a leather folder closed in front of her. Grant looked tired. I hated that the sight of it still worked on me. 4 weeks wasn't enough, he said. "Fine, we can do 8. I'm not negotiating the price of a false record. You need income, we need closure. I need my professional record corrected." He leaned closer. "If the hotel cancels, the bank cuts our line. If the line goes, second shift goes. You will have proven your point to people standing in an unemployment office." Elaine winced. Grant saw it and changed direction. "Come back," he said, "and paid suspension ends today. You report to Owen, complete retraining, and we issue a joint statement that process variation caused the complaints." "Which process?" "We are still determining that." "Then what am I being retrained on?" His spoon stopped. It was a tiny thing, but I saw the moment he understood I would not accept vague language simply because it came with my paycheck. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Maybe. You think those sealed samples save you? They prove what we intended to use. They don't prove what happened on every production run." He knew Celia had contacted me. I folded my hands beneath the table so he couldn't see them react. What did happen on every production run? Grant signaled the waitress for the check. Elaine opened her folder after he walked away. She removed a copy of the revised corrective action and placed it in front of me. The pending line had been completed. Witness, Rosa Mendez, lamination lead. "She signed?" I asked. Elaine's eyes stayed on the paper. "She accepted the promotion this morning." Outside the diner window, Grant stood beside his car with his phone to his ear, watching me through the glass. The corrective action said Rosa had seen me reuse an oven code. Her copied shift log said the line temperatures were normal and Grant had moved the approved butter. One of those documents could cost her a promotion. The other could cost her job. Elaine slid the paper back into her folder. "You're going to let him use that?" I asked. "I don't decide what he uses." "You put your name on the emails." "My name goes on every personnel email." "That isn't what I asked." Her eyes lifted to mine. Rosa signed a summary of an interview. She did not write the statement. "Did she read it?" Grant read it to her. "That's another question." Elaine closed the folder. Through the diner window, Grant turned away from us, though his reflection stayed in the glass. "I have worked for your family for 19 years, she said. "I know the difference between surviving a bad quarter and becoming the bad quarter. I'm still trying to decide which one this is." She left cash beneath her untouched water glass and followed him outside. I wrote down her exact words before driving away. The next contract lab shift didn't come. Denise sent an apologetic email saying their customer had delayed the panel. I answered that I understood, then stood in my kitchen looking at the car payment notice on the counter. The dealership offered less than I owed. A used car lot offered slightly more and gave me 48 hours to accept. I began taking photographs of the interior, embarrassed by the coffee stain near the gear shift, as if a clean floor mat might change my life. Celia's next message arrived while I was vacuuming. The hotel group had placed new Hartwell shipments on hold pending ingredient verification. They wanted help interpreting a case visible in one of the receiving photographs. The image was grainy, taken from above the dock as part of the bakery's standard intake record. Behind 2 pallets of flour stood a stack of white cartons with black corners. I enlarged the label until the letters broke into blocks. Bakeflex 62, Roll-In Blend. The lot number began BL-882. Celia asked whether Bakeflex appeared on the approved formula or in Hartwell's audit disclosures. I answered no. 5 minutes later, Grant emailed me. Cease interference with active client relationship. Your conduct is damaging the company and the livelihoods of its employees. He attached nothing and named no conduct. He wanted a sentence broad enough to make every fact feel dangerous. I forwarded it to my personal archive and returned to the receiving photograph. The cases were dated 3 days after Celia's audit and 2 days before full hotel production began. Rosa's log placed them at the sheeter. The hotel's complaint lot came off that line. The chain was becoming visible, but Grant still had one defense. Hartwell produced dough for other customers, and Bakeflex could have been used in any of it. To connect the substitute to the hotel batch, we needed usage records, pallet movements, or someone who had seen the cases opened. Someone knocked once on my apartment door. Rosa stood in the hallway wearing her new assistant production manager jacket. Her name had been embroidered beneath the title so recently that the backing paper still showed around the letters. That was fast, I said. Grant had a spare jacket made. In your size? One size too big. Maybe he's expecting me to grow into my integrity. I stepped aside. She didn't enter. You saw the statement? Yes. I saw you use an old oven code once. My stomach dropped. On which batch? None, during training. You were showing me how the audit trail caught duplicate codes. You entered one on purpose so the system would reject it. Did you tell Grant that? I told him exactly that. And you signed his summary. He read me the part that said I had observed you entering a prior code. Then he turned the page and said the rest was management's conclusion. You didn't ask to read it? I asked. He said we were holding up production. The answer made me angry because it sounded like every shortcut Rosa would have torn apart if an operator offered it to her. You knew what he was doing. Yes. And you took the promotion. Yes. Her refusal to defend herself left me with nowhere easy to put the anger. Why are you here? She pulled a folded document from inside her jacket. This is my correction. It says what I actually observed, when I observed it, and why you entered the code. I gave a copy to Elaine. Did she accept it? She said I should go back to work. Did Grant see it? He tore his copy in half. I unfolded the page. Rosa had signed and dated it. At the bottom, she had written that she had never seen me reuse a code during commercial production. I can send this to Celia. You can send it wherever you want. What happens to your promotion? It happened already. She tugged at the loose sleeve. Whether it lasts is Grant's spiritual journey. That almost made me smile. Did you see Bakeflex opened on the hotel run? Her humor disappeared. I saw black corner cases staged. Grant told me it was a temporary blend trial. Owen brought the blocks to the in-feed after startup. Did the batch record identify it? The batch record already had the cultured butter lot printed on it. Who crossed it out? Nobody. So the wrong lot stayed on the sheet. Rosa looked down the hall. Grant said purchasing had approved an equivalent ingredient. He said the formula declaration didn't change because both products were fat. But the hotel specification named cultured butter. I know what it named. Will you put the rest in writing? I put in writing what I can prove. The shift log says what I measured and what got moved. If I write what Grant said, he'll say I misunderstood. He'll say that anyway. Then let him do some of his own work. She walked toward the stairs, oversized sleeves swinging around her hands. Rosa. She stopped. I'm sorry he made the promotion feel like this. She stared at the new title stitched over her chest. He didn't make all of it, she said. Some of it was me. Celia received Rose's correction, the unofficial temperature log, and a photograph of the brass probe's calibration sticker. I sent them separately with short descriptions and kept the originals. The hotel group didn't answer immediately. Grant did. He increased the severance offer to 10 weeks and added a clause requiring me to retract unsubstantiated allegations of ingredient substitution. He also offered to restore my insurance through the end of the quarter. The car lot's offer expired at 5 that afternoon. I accepted the car offer and rejected Grant's. Dad found out because the vehicle title still listed his repair shop as my mailing address. He arrived after work and stood beside the empty parking space. "You sold it." "I can take the bus to the lab. The lab is 2 transfers away. I've got time." "That's supposed to be funny?" "No." He followed me upstairs, angrier than he had been when I refused to sign. "You're letting this eat your whole life. Grant is doing the eating." He told me he offered 10 weeks, with a retraction. Nobody remembers the exact wording of a separation agreement. I would. Dad paced to the window and back. "Second shift worked 4 days this week. The shipment hold is already costing hours." I didn't substitute the ingredient. I know. The words stopped him as much as they stopped me. I waited. He sat down at my kitchen table. "I asked Grant what butter was used," he said. "He told me the formula was equivalent, not unchanged, equivalent." "Those are different answers." "I know that too." The refrigerator clicked off. In the quiet, I could hear traffic pushing over wet pavement outside. "Why did you ask me to sign?" I said. "Because I thought he would fix the product after he protected the contract. By keeping me responsible. He's my brother. I'm your daughter." Dad pressed his thumb against a scratch in the tabletop. I spent most of my life believing those 2 facts would pull in the same direction. He left without asking me to settle again. The next useful fact came from Priya Shah in purchasing. She used her personal email and wrote as if we were discussing an office supply order. "Can you meet to return the blue stapler from your desk box?" It was purchased by Hartwell. I did not own a blue stapler. We met in the public seating area of a grocery store 2 blocks from the bakery. Priya placed a grocery list between us and spoke while comparing prices in the weekly circular. "Grant ordered Bakeflex through a distributor we already use for pan release," she said. "He told me to code it as a production aid. Did you object?" "In writing. Do you still have it?" "The email is on the company server. Elaine is included." "Why tell me?" "Because the hotel requested purchasing records, and Grant wants me to send only ingredient purchase orders. Production aids go in a separate report." He's separating it from the request. He says that is the ordinary accounting structure. "Is it?" "Yes." Priya folded the circular. "That's what makes it useful." "Did he say where Bakeflex would be used?" "He said it was for internal yield trials. Then he ordered enough for 6 hotel runs." "How much cultured butter did we have?" "Enough for the pilot and first commercial mix. Not enough for the full order after he redirected 4 pallets." "To whom?" "A cash customer in Cincinnati who paid the old contract price plus freight." Grant had not simply saved money by using the cheaper blend. He had sold the expensive butter where it generated immediate cash, then filled the hotel order with Bakeflex to preserve margin before the bank review. Credible, deliberate, and stupid only if someone compared the right records. "Will you give that to the hotel?" I asked. "I will answer any question they ask me. I am not volunteering a document Grant can accuse me of taking." "Fair." Priya tapped the grocery list. "Ask them to request purchasing records for all materials consumed or staged during hotel production, regardless of accounting category." I repeated the sentence back until I had it exactly. As we stood, she handed me a blue stapler from her tote bag. "This actually was in your box," she said. "Elaine removed it before the courier came." "Why?" "Grant said it belonged to Hartwell. It has my name scratched underneath. He said the scratch damaged company property. I laughed in the middle of the grocery store until my eyes watered. Priya laughed too, though more quietly. Celia used Priya's wording in the client's formal request. Hartwell produced the Bakeflex invoices, the receiving image and inventory movement reports 2 days later. Grant labeled the documents confidential and included a written explanation that the blend had been staged for non-commercial testing. The movement report placed 4 black corner cases in the lamination room during H-0314. Grant blamed a scan error. The hotel group scheduled a controlled bake comparison at its test kitchen. Celia would open the client-held controls, verify the seals, and compare them with unopened Bakeflex and finished complaint product retained by 2 hotels. Hartwell could send 3 representatives. The invitation included my name as an independent witness to the original sample collection. Grant objected. The hotel declined to remove me. He came to my apartment that evening alone. I left the chain on the door. You wanted a public correction, he said through the gap. I'll give you one. We'll say the investigation cleared you of intentional misconduct. Intentional misconduct was never the accusation. It's what people hear. I want the original corrective action withdrawn. If you walk into that kitchen tomorrow, the shipment hold becomes a cancellation. That depends on what's in the samples. His face moved closer to the opening. You think you're punishing me, he said. You're punishing everyone whose name you don't know. I know their names. You used them when you asked me to lie. For a second, he looked like the uncle who had brought sandwiches and built me a job on a yellow legal pad. Then he looked at the chain. You learned boundaries late, he said. I learned them from you. I closed the door. In the morning, I carried my notebook, Rose's original log, the brass probe, and the stained tasting card into the same hotel test kitchen where Grant had ordered me out. 3 stainless tins waited on the center table. Cobalt tape ran unbroken across every lid. Celia stood behind the tins with a chain of custody form clipped to a board. Vivian and Elliot occupied the same side of the table. On the other side, Grant had brought Elaine and Owen. Grant's eyes moved from my notebook to the stained tasting card tucked inside it. You brought food waste into a controlled kitchen, he said. Vivian pulled on a pair of gloves. That food waste came from my plate. Grant sat down. Celia read the seal numbers aloud. I checked them against my audit notes, then initialed the form beside her. Grant declined when she offered him the pen. I don't concede that those samples represent commercial production, he said. You signed the audit closeout identifying them as commercial controls, Elliot said. I signed acknowledgement that samples were collected. Vivian opened the audit report to page 6 and rotated it toward him. You signed directly beneath the sample designations. Grant studied his own signature as if somebody had done an excellent imitation. Celia used a clean blade to cut the cobalt tape on the first tin. The adhesive released with a soft rip. Inside was a block of cultured butter, wrapped in film, still bearing the creamery's lot mark. She opened the pilot dough next, then the first commercial mix. The surface of both dough samples had faded during frozen storage, but the layers were visible at the cut edge, pale dough alternating with thin yellow lines. The 4th item was not one of our tins. It was a full Bakeflex case with black corners, pulled from Hartwell's freezer under the hotel's expanded records request. Grant had placed a red quarantine sticker across the top after the shipment hold began. The inventory report said the case had been received with 11 others. The movement report put 4 of them in the lamination room during H-0314. Celia cut Grant's quarantine tape and opened the carton. The blocks inside were wrapped in white plastic printed with the same BL-882 lot family Rosa had written on her shift log. Bakeflex was an internal trial material, Grant said. It never entered hotel product. Elliot lifted a document from his folder. Your purchasing manager states you ordered enough for 6 hotel runs. She stated the quantity was equivalent to 6 runs. That is not the same thing. Your receiving record classifies it as a production aid. That's our normal accounting structure. It was staged during hotel production. According to a scan record we've already identified as unreliable. Grant answered each point quickly and cleanly. He was good at this because each sentence contained one fact arranged to hide the next one. Vivian turned to Owen. Were the black corner cases present at the sheeter? Owen looked at Grant. "This isn't a courtroom," Grant said. "No," Vivian said. "It's a supplier review. You chose your representatives." Owen rubbed both palms down the front of his trousers. "Yes," he said. "The cases were present." "For what purpose?" Grant said we were doing a blend trial. "During our production?" Owen's eyes stayed on the steel table. "Yes." Grant leaned toward him. "You understood that trial material was segregated." "I understood that after startup, I was supposed to bring the softer blocks to the in-feed." Elaine closed her eyes. Grant's voice became gentle. "Owen, think carefully." "I have been." He looked up. "For about 2 weeks. Celia portioned the 3 dough samples while Vivian prepared the hotel-retained complaint product. 2 properties had held unopened cartons from different deliveries. Their pastry pieces went onto separate pans, marked only with codes. The proofing cabinet hummed behind us. Our dough did not require proofing before baking, but Vivian used the cabinet to bring every sample to the same starting temperature. She measured surface temperature with an infrared unit and wrote each number on a grid. Grant watched her work. "The hotels may have mishandled the product," he said. "A warm dock could cause fat migration." 2 properties, 2 deliveries, same defect. Vivian said, "It happens. So does ingredient substitution." "That is an irresponsible accusation." The word hung in the air. He had used a softer version of it on me, unsubstantiated, but the purpose was the same. If he could make asking the question sound reckless, maybe nobody would require the answer. I removed Rosa's original log from my notebook. Her 15-minute readings stayed between 44 and 46, I said. The dough stayed at 48. The line was within our approved range. Grant glanced at the page. An unofficial sheet removed from company property. It was wrapped around my temperature probe. A piece of paper doesn't become credible because it touches your belongings. Celia compared the calibration sticker on the probe with the number Rosa had written at the top of the log. "The unit was in calibration," she said. "That doesn't establish who wrote the numbers or when." Elaine opened her folder. "I witnessed Rosa provide the same correction statement to management," she said. "She also confirmed the log under her own name yesterday." Grant turned toward her slowly. Elaine placed Rosa's correction on the table. The statement used in Mara's disciplinary report was incomplete. Rosa's observation occurred during training, when Mara deliberately demonstrated that a duplicate code would be rejected. "You're the controller," Grant said. "Stay within your function. Personnel records are within my function." That was the moment his competence began working against him. He had taught every person in the room to respect a defined responsibility. Now each of them was standing inside one he could not erase. The ovens chimed. Vivian loaded all 5 pans at the original approved setting. No added time, no darker finish to hide the interior. While they baked, Celia distributed the independent laboratory report on the complaint lots. I understood enough lipid analysis to find the important rows quickly. The hotel samples had a higher palmitic acid pattern, a broader melting range, and reduced dairy markers compared with cultured butter. Their profile aligned with the Bakeflex manufacturer's specification. Grant read the first page and put it down. Fat chemistry can shift during processing. "Not into a different source material," I said. He looked at me. "You haven't worked in lipid analysis for 3 years. "Then let Celia answer." "It does not shift that way," Celia said. The ovens chimed again. When Vivian opened the doors, the smell reached us before the pans came out. The cultured butter controls smelled warm, sweet, and faintly tangy. The pilot dough had lifted into an even fan. The first commercial mix stood a little lower after months in storage, but its layers remained distinct. The 2 complaint lots were darker and flatter, clear fat pooled around their bases. Vivian cut one from each pan. The controls cracked beneath the knife. The complaint pieces compressed, leaving a waxy film on the blade. She set my stained tasting card beside them. The half moon on the paper matched the fresh amber ring almost exactly. Grant pointed toward the oven. "You've demonstrated a performance difference. You have not demonstrated my knowledge." Elliot slid 3 emails across the table. Priya's written objection to coding Bakeflex as a production aid, Grant's instruction to proceed because the substitution was temporary and margin necessary, his direction to move 4 pallets of cultured butter to the Cincinnati cash order. Grant didn't touch them. Elaine had been included on all 3. When the client requested the complete category of records, she had produced them. "I was managing a cash emergency," Grant said. "The butter was costing us more than the contract allowed. Bakeflex was represented as functionally equivalent." "The client specification required cultured butter," I said. "I know what it required." The room became very still. His admission had not sounded dramatic. It sounded tired. Grant pressed both hands against the table. "I intended to bridge 6 weeks. We would correct the blend after the bank renewal. The product passed internal release." "Because the release sheets retained the cultured butter lot number," Celia said. He turned on me again. "Quality should have detected the difference." "I did, on the Saturday trial. I asked Owen what we were running." Owen nodded. "I told her scrap recovery. That's what Grant told me to say." "And when complaints started?" Vivian asked. "Grant ordered more bake time after complaint 22. My tray label traced to the darker test batch. The timestamp on the tasting card placed it after the extra bake instruction. Rosa's temperatures ruled out the sheeter excuse. The Bakeflex lot on her log matched the unopened case. The movement record placed that case on the line. Priya's emails supplied the reason. The fat profile supplied the result. Every route Grant had built away from the truth ended at a fact someone else had kept." Vivian rested both hands on the table. "The sealed samples speak for themselves," she said. "The approved controls perform as specified. The complaint product matches the substitute material, not the approved ingredient. Hartwell's original explanation blaming quality release is unsupported." She looked directly at me. "Mara, our written findings will state that you approved the contracted formula and that the production change occurred outside the documented quality release process." The vindication came quietly enough that I could hear the ventilation fan over the ovens. Grant stared at the open tins. Elliot outlined the consequences. The shipment hold would become a suspension for 1 season. Hartwell would reimburse complaint credits and testing costs. Requalification would require independent oversight, corrected batch records, and written confirmation that Grant no longer controlled ingredient substitutions or quality investigations. "We can't survive a lost season," Grant said. "You knew the contract terms," Elliot replied. "I knew the product could be fixed." Vivian removed her gloves. "The product was never the only complaint." Grant walked out before the samples cooled. Hartwell's bank review happened under the weight of the suspension. The lender renewed a reduced operating line only after Grant surrendered day-to-day control to an outside operations manager and accepted monthly inventory reporting. Second shift lost hours for several weeks, then picked up private label work that used the bakery's existing equipment. The company stayed open. Grant kept his ownership and lost the part he valued most, the right to make every answer final. Elaine sent me a proposed correction letter. I returned it with 3 edits. It had to withdraw the corrective action, state that no training failure had occurred, and go to every person who received Grant's original explanation, including the hotel team. I also requested back pay for the unpaid suspension, 10 weeks severance, and insurance through the quarter, the same terms Grant had offered in exchange for my retraction. The new operations manager accepted all 3. He asked if I would return as quality supervisor. I declined. Celia's firm brought me on for contract audits first. The work meant buses, rented cars, unfamiliar plants, and motel coffee that could remove paint. It also meant I could ask where an ingredient came from without someone treating the question as betrayal. 3 months later, they offered me a permanent supplier quality position. Dad came to my apartment the night before my first audit as lead reviewer. The aloe plant had recovered enough to send up a narrow green shoot. He set a roll of cobalt tamper tape on the table. Elaine said Hartwell owed you one, he said. Did Elaine say that, or did you? She said the tape inventory was none of my business. That sounds like Elaine. He turned the roll with one finger. I asked you to protect the family business by letting it ruin your name. Yes, I'm sorry. The apology did not repair everything. It did not need to pretend it could. I put the tape in my audit case. At the supplier plant the next morning, I filled a stainless tin with a butter control, pressed the cobalt strip across the lid, and wrote my initials over the seam. The plant manager watched me seal it. You always this careful? He asked. Yes. The tin went into the retain freezer with the ordinary click of metal against metal. I closed the door and kept the key.